My name is Bob McNally. I am up from Washington, D.C., where I run an energy consulting firm called the Rapidan Group, but I am very happy to be here today in my other capacity as a non-resident fellow at Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy. I am honored, and we should all be very glad, and it's great to see a full crowd here, to welcome Dr. Fatih Birol, the IEA Executive Director, and Peter Fraser, the head of IEA's Gas, Coal, and Power Markets Division, for the launch, the global launch of IEA's annual natural gas market analysis and forecast report. It's been renamed Gas 2017. Before we go much further, let me just say that this event, like all of those at the center, is being live webcast and is available on podcast and so forth afterwards in the coming days. And for those of you who are watching online, as well as those of you in the audience, you can ask questions for panelists at any time using the hashtag CGEPevents or our Twitter handle at ColumbiaUEnergy. Okay, again, we've got the right folks in the room to talk about natural gas. Dr. Fatih Birol is coming up on his second year as Executive Director at the IEA. Dr. Birol rose through the ranks over the last 20 years at the IEA, very unusual to do that, to lead an organization like IEA, having risen through the ranks, entered as an analyst. And before that, worked at OPEC as an oil analyst. Dr. Birol is a well-known expert on energy and a thought leader in the energy sector. Forbes declared him one of the most influential in energy events and so forth, and energy thinking. And so we are honored to have him here to talk about this gas market update. Peter Fraser comes from our great friend to the north and is on his second stint at the IEA. I think you've been here about 6 months now and is head of the Gas, Coal, and Power Markets Division. Peter also had worked at the Ontario Energy Board and was a regulator in the Canadian province of Ontario, most recently as Vice President of the Consumer Protection and Industry Performance section up there. And from 1989 to 1998, Peter was an energy policy advisor at the Ontario Ministry of Energy. And so, again, delighted to have you both here and talk about gas. Now, let's just for very briefly, I'm an oil guy, I'm a barrel counter, but gas is amazing. What a commodity. 15 years ago, I was in the White House working. I had Jason Bordoff's job in the National Economic Council, and we were looking at becoming 1/4 dependent, import dependent on natural gas. I'm going to beg Qatar for our gas. 12 years ago, Henry Hub was $14. Had risen sixfold in the last 3 years. 4 years ago, Asian LNG was $17. Now it's less than $6. If you had told me back then that we'd be sitting here today and talking about the U.S. being the largest producer, who had pretty much tapped out power switching, and what was going to produce, the biggest producer going forward, had so much gas it was going to be exporting that gas. It was going to be contending with Qatar and Australia as a major exporting power, and that President Trump was going to be promising China, our gas exports are secure, don't worry, we're there for you. I would have bet a lot of money the other way on all that. But that's natural gas in the last 15 years. So what a commodity. We have the right thing to talk about today. We have the right people here. And I want to say we're in the right place. Events like this one today are made possible by the Center's growing gas market research program, led by Tim Bursma, who is traveling today, but his lead analyst, Akash Losh, is here in the crowd. It also builds on the expertise of non-resident fellows like Titania Mitrova, Ira Joseph, Teddy Cott, and my colleague Leslie Palti-Gutzman from the Rapidan Group, who's also in the crowd with us today. Jason was quite fortuitous. I think he's in London, but he was quite fortuitous and prescient, as usual, in launching the gas program 2 years ago, and has been a thought leader on exports, carbon policy, import for LNG, and all the other factors that go into LNG. So again, we're in the right place. We have the right people. And we're talking about the right thing. So now on to the report. We are discussing the global launch of the IEA's Global Gas 2017 Market Report. This provides a detailed analysis of supply and trade developments, infrastructure investments, demand growth forecasts through 2022. We're going to have Dr. Birol and Peter Fraser are going to present the report. Afterwards, we're going to have a bit of a moderated discussion up here. Then we're going to open it up to questions. Again, hashtag CGEPevents. Or Twitter handle at ColumbiaUEnergy if you have questions. So with that, over to you, Dr. Birol, and thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you very much, Bob, and it's a great, great pleasure to be with you here at Columbia and in New York. And we are honored that, Bob, you are chairing this very important, from our point of view, launch of our report. As you may know, we have the World Energy Outlook, which looks at the next 25, 30 years, but for different fuels, we have specific reports look at the next 5 years, what is happening, and on the oil, for gas, for coal, for renewables, and first fuel for us, and efficiency. And we are releasing these reports in different parts of the world, but for gas, we thought we released the report here. As Mr. McNally rightly said, this is the right place to release the gas report. It's a great pleasure to be here with the Columbia and to see good friends. Our former governing board vice chair is here, Mr. Elka, and our former division head for oil, Antoine Half, is here, and many other good friends and colleagues. Why did we decide to release our gas report here? Because the action is here. So after this meeting, I am going to visit several TV channels and newspapers to talk about what is happening in the US and what are the implications of that. So if I can give you 4 numbers before we go to the, we will give you many numbers, but and most of the time will be given by Peter, and you can forget his numbers, but remember my 4 numbers here. First of all, some of them you know, US is today #1 oil producer. US is today #1 gas producer. And as of April, US became net gas exporter. So net gas exporter. This is number 2. And fourth, what we are seeing in 5 years of time, as a result of about 40% of the global gas production coming from the United States, US will be together with Qatar and Australia top 3 LNG exporter, with huge implications on prices, gas security, trade, among other things. So how we are going to do is that I'm going to say a few words as an introduction, and my colleague, Mr. Fraser, is going to give you the basis of those words, and at the end I will try to summarize our findings. So the gas is, as we all know, it's a versatile fuel, and among all fossil fuels, it is the cleanest. And it has implications, positive implications, when it replaces coal, both for climate change, but also, and this is very important, to address the air pollution, local pollution in the cities. We see that in the United States now, there was, as of 2016, it became the largest source of electricity generation, and it had many implications. I want to give you one, again, another number. Global emissions worldwide increased every year, global CO2 emissions, when the global economy grew. It is decades and decades. But in the last 3 years, global emissions growth stalled. No growth whatsoever, it's flat. Even though global economy increased. For example, 2016, global economy increased, global GDP increased more than 3%, but the emissions were flat. And the United States was at the forefront of reducing these emissions, which are critical for climate change. The biggest reductions in 2016 in the world of CO2 emissions came from the United States, mainly as a result of this second fact, gas replacing coal. Now, we have a substantial amount of gas, but also life is not very easy for gas to have much bigger penetration in markets. The main reason is that, especially in Asia, where the energy demand growth comes from, there is a strong pressure coming from coal, which is much cheaper. So, for the next power plant you are going to build in East Asia or in South Asia, gas has to compete with the cheap coal, domestic or imported coal. This is one. And on the other hand, there is other pressure coming from renewables, solar and wind, whose cost of production is declining substantially and in many cases supported by governments for different reasons. So as a result of that, we see that the gas has to compete with coal and renewables to have a bigger market share. And in some regions, such as Europe, where the renewables are substantially enjoying substantial support from governments, we have seen that within the EU power markets, gas lost 25% market share in the last 10 years. 25% is not peanuts. 1/4 market share loss of gas in Europe, and the biggest growth come from renewables. So there's a lot of gas, but the issue is competition in the absence of, in terms of local pollution environment, any regulation coming from governments. Now, some of you may know, some of you not. We publish World Energy Outlook every year, and in the year 2009, 8 years ago, in our executive summary, we had a line, I remember very well, we said, a silent revolution taking place in North America. With the silent revolution, we meant the shale revolution at that time, and this silent revolution in the meantime became very loud with all its implications, both for oil and gas. Now we are seeing a second revolution now, or we are talking about the second revolution, which is the revolution of LNG. In a very short period of time, we are going to see that about 150 BCM new LNG capacity coming to the markets. It's a huge growth, and this would mean that we are going to see a completely different picture in the gas trade. As you know, gas trade is made through pipelines and LNG. We are seeing that a new capacity coming to markets will create a lot of competition, as my colleague, Mr. Fraser, will tell you. And this coming from US and also from Australia, thanks to the coal bed methane production. This on the production side, on the side of the consumers are making more and more use of that, and will make even more in the future in terms of LNG. Only in the year 2005, there were 15 LNG importing countries, and today there are 39. So from 15 2005, today 39, it's going to grow substantially. I am coming here just from Istanbul. There was the World Petroleum Congress, where the oil and gas industry leaders met, all the CEOs. And even though it is called Petroleum Congress, a key topic was LNG. How LNG is going to redefine the market conditions, and it was a major issue. So I'm going to, before leaving to my colleague Mr. Fraser, we think at the IEA, natural gas doesn't get the attention from policymakers that it deserves. Both in terms of it is positive role with the new changes in the global gas scene in terms of energy security, but also in terms of its environmental benefits. Once again, when I say environmental benefits, when it replaces coal for CO2 emissions, but more importantly, in terms of demand growth, for addressing local pollution in emerging countries. Especially in China and more other Asian countries, gas is going to, or being used, supported in order to reduce the coal to address the local pollution issue, to give, as the Chinese colleagues say, blue skies to the citizens. With this introductory words, I will pass it to my colleague, Mr. Fraser, to tell us a bit more what are the underlying arguments for those statements. Peter.
Thank you, Fatih, and good morning, everybody. So let's begin by talking about demand growth by sector. Now, if you look at the past six-year period, the demand growth for natural gas has been growing about 1% per year, compound annual growth. And the pattern of growth has been pretty consistent over the last 6 years and even the last decade or two, where leading that demand was growth of natural gas for power generation, followed by growth in natural gas for industry. But when we look ahead over the next 6 years, we see that those positions are reversed. It's actually industry growth that's going to lead the growth in demand for natural gas, with power generation falling back quite significantly in its rate of growth. So even though the overall rate of growth is similar to before, 1.6 compared to 1.5 for the last 6 years, it is the industry growth that is the main driving factor. It's industry in China, United States, India, the rest of developing Asia, and the Middle East, which are the main contributors to this. As Dr. Birol has emphasized, the push for gas in China, as I'll talk more about in a minute, and industry is partly a desire to improve urban air quality. So it's converting coal boilers to natural gas boilers is a big driver there. But also, and perhaps the biggest contributor to growth by sector, is the growth in the use of natural gas for feedstocks in the petrochemical industry and for fertilizer. The former throughout the world, but especially here in the United States, it's a big driver. Fertilizer in places like India and Indonesia. As Dr. Birol has explained, the reasons for the power generation demand growth going down. The combination of renewables growing, coal being increasingly competitive in more and more electricity markets means gas does not have a lot of room to grow, and it finds itself squeezed in a vice. Let me now turn to the picture by region and by country. We have a growth of about 360 billion cubic meters, and I'll be using BCM throughout this presentation, but that's 12.6 TCF, in case you were wondering. Where's that growth coming from? Well, at the highest level, that growth is coming from developing countries. And you can see here that's close to 90% of the net growth that we see is coming from developing countries and relatively little from the developed economies. When we break that down into individual areas or regions, what stands out, of course, is the growth in China. It averages 8.7% per annum, amounting to 135 billion cubic meters. That's about 4.8 TCF. And that is very much a consequence of a deliberate policy decision by the Chinese government to increase the use of gas in the energy mix there. It's only about 6% now. They want to get it above 8.3 to 10% by 2020. And so there's a big push on both on the demand side and, as you'll hear, on the supply side as well, to increase the use of gas. The underlying driver of that is not just energy diversification, but as Dr. Birol emphasized, to deal with urban air pollution, which is a very serious problem. So there are a lot of policies and programs aimed at encouraging that conversion that will displace tens of millions of tons of coal from use. India is also growing strongly, but even from an even smaller base. It's only about 5% of the energy supply of India, but it's going to grow at 6% per annum over the next 6 years. The Middle East is where gas is a big share, by contrast, a big share of the energy supply. Economic growth there, substitution of gas for oil and power generation helps keep gas growing pretty strongly in that area. The rest of the world, developing Asia, is about 3%. It's about the same rate of growth in Africa as well, contributes to that. Compare that to what's going on in the developed economies. We see growth in Australia and Canada being offset by a very small reduction in Europe and a more significant reduction in Japan and Korea. And when you take all that away, that means most of the net growth is really accounted for by the United States. About half of that happens in industry. Very little is going to happen in power generation. I think 2016 was a pretty high share of power generation in gas and power generation. We don't think it will grow much over the next 6 years. And as well as other sectors account for that growth in the developed economies. So the U.S. is really driving that growth. Now, whereas the story on the demand side is really a story primarily about developing countries and about industry. On the supply side, the story is really about the United States. And though you can see growth in the other regions here, it's the United States, already the largest gas producer in the world, is going to be also have the greatest growth over any other country or even any other region, with about 140 BCM or about 5 TCF of supply growth. Next to that is the Middle East to deal with the increase in demand I spoke about earlier, and so that gas will stay in the region. China also is going to increase its own supplies significantly, about 63 BCM to have 200 BCM of supply. That's going to be nowhere near enough to match the anticipated increase in demand. So China is going to become a bigger importer of gas. The Australian growth, of course, is for export for LNG. Similarly, Russian growth is also for export, split between LNG and also pipeline gas. Although that pipeline gas is mainly not going to Europe, it will be going in the latter part of the period to China. Europe, as many of you are aware, has had declining production for a number of years, and that we expect that decline in production to continue. Let's have a closer look, though, at the U.S. After all, it is the most important part of the story. As Bob was saying at the outset, it's been a remarkable turnaround. We talked about the quiet revolution, but it's remarkable, of course, how it's going to continue. And a big part of the U.S. production story in the last, say, 7, 8 years has really been about the Marcellus. And so what we see is that when we look at what's happened, Marcellus has really come from a very low amount of production as recently as 2009, up to about 170 BCM. That's about 6 TCF or so by 2016. But also look at how costs have come down. That's illustrated by the light blue line you see on the chart there. You see costs typically of $4 a million BTU in the early days, now down under 2. And also how Henry Hub prices have fallen. But you also notice we've added the red line there, which is the price at Dominion South, which is located relatively close to the Marcellus fields. And you can see there's a significant basis differential has built up over the last few years. And that's because there hasn't been enough pipeline capacity to keep pace with the rapid production growth. But that is in the process of changing. In the next few years, we expect another 185 BCM of takeaway capacity from Marcellus. That's close to 18 BCFD to support additional growth in the Marcellus region. And so as a consequence, we expect Marcellus production to grow another 80 BCM on top of the production last year to reach 250 BCM or 8.8 TCF by 2022. The other new story, of course, and one of the emerging stories in this report is the entry of the U.S. LNG into LNG export markets. Last year, Sabine Pass was exporting LNG close to 5 billion cubic meters. And the interesting thing about one of the interesting things about the U.S. entry into the markets is its use of a different business model, one which is much more flexible on delivery, and so gas is going to go where the margins are greatest. So we did a little analysis of how that looks and trying to decide where the regions are. And as you can see on the chart there, that although the cost of the gas is the same, there are of course differences in the shipping cost. And finally, of course, the difference in the price of gas in the destination markets. And that, just to compare Americas on the left with Europe on the right, you can see although Americas and Europe have similar shipping costs and similar, of course, gas cost, the price of gas in Latin America was a lot higher than it was in Europe last year. So not surprisingly, when you look at the shares, Americas accounts for nearly half the gas exported, and Europe only 10%. In 2016, U.S. LNG was exported to 17 different countries. The leading countries were Chile and Mexico, and we expect that to change and shift as the prices in the different markets change. U.S. LNG is much more responsive to the changes in the global marketplace. But one of the places they will have to go is Europe, because Europe is going to need to import more natural gas. Just very simply here, the production's dropping. That means with demand flat, the imports are going to increase. And as a consequence of those, Europe needs more gas and has set itself up to get it in different ways. One thing it's done is built a significant number of regasification terminals. And so we start to see new gas importing countries in Europe. Lithuania last year and Poland now are starting to import LNG. But those facilities are not used anywhere near to capacity, about 25% capacity, and they could import a lot more if they wish to. But there's also a new major pipeline that's coming in. It's called the Southern Gas Corridor. It's actually a series of pipelines that will bring gas from Azerbaijan or the Caspian all the way through Turkey into Southeast Europe, which will also be a new resource to improve Europe's security of supply. So with growing import requirements, there's going to be real competition between pipelines from Russia, from North Africa, from the Southern Gas Corridor, and with various LNG suppliers to meet that increasing need for imported gas. Let me now turn more to LNG and its role and its increasing role. LNG in 2016 accounted for just under 10% of total natural gas demand. Yet from 2016 to 2022, it'll account for 30% of the demand growth. And so it's growing a lot faster, at about 4.5% per year, versus the 1.6 for natural gas demand. And supply has been coming on in anticipation of that increase of demand. What we're seeing actually is a second wave of LNG liquefaction capacity coming online. The first wave, 2009 to 2011, was largely Qatari gas. Turned out to be very timely in the aftermath of the earthquake and nuclear accident in Japan. But the second wave has already started, and you can see in 2016 significant capacity already being added, both by Australia and by the United States. In the next few years, Australia will complete its additions, but you can see the U.S. contribution growing right out to 2022. So right now we have 15 new projects with total export capacity of around 140 BCM under construction, and Australia and the United States accounting for 75% of them. By 2022, there'll be 650 BCM liquefaction capacity available, but demand for LNG, although it's growing strongly, we anticipate at 460 BCM. That means LNG markets will remain well supplied throughout the period. It's a good opportunity for consumers. So when we look at the demand side of the LNG market, one of the many remarkable changes that are taking place in that is the change in the number of customers, which Fatih referred to earlier, but also where they're coming from. And so if we look at developed country demand for LNG, we can see that actually since 2012 it's down a bit, and actually it won't really change very much out to 2022. Totally different story on developing economy side. 2012, they were a small part of the picture, but you see steady growth throughout the period, so that by 2022, the majority of LNG consumption is taking place in developing countries. Dr. Birol mentioned that we've grown from 15 in 2005 to 39 countries today. That number grows to 46 by 2022. It's much easier and cheaper now to get into the LNG importing business. Floating storage and regasification units have made the cost of entry much lower, and so we are seeing countries building such facilities and adding LNG import regasification capacity relatively quickly. So with that, with all this LNG and the growth in the LNG market, as Dr. Birol referred to, we already see months where the United States is becoming a net LNG exporter. In fact, last year the top 5 exporters were, as you see on the chart here, Russia, Qatar, Norway, Canada, who exports to the United States, by the way, and Australia. And the U.S. last year was still a net importer of natural gas, Canadian gas, of course. But that situation will change quite completely by 2022, as you can see here, that the United States now is one of the top 5 exporters of natural gas overall. They export, of course, LNG and also pipeline gas back to Canada and down to Mexico. And furthermore, it will be one of the top 3 LNG exporters in the world. It will be along with Qatar and Australia. The U.S. will be part of a very geographically diversified big 3 of LNG. So and with that, I'll turn it back to Dr. Birol.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's finish by trying to summarize some of the numbers we have seen. Now, in Asia, the center of the energy demand growth, we think with the lots of LNG coming to markets, lower prices, we can expect a great growing share of gas. Currently, worldwide, the share of gas is about close to 25%, 23% currently. And in China, it is 5%. In India, it is 5%. And both of these countries have major challenges in terms of air quality, and we think it is the reason why China and other Asian countries will be the drivers of the energy demand growth. This is one change compared to past. The second change is from the power sector, where the entire attention of the energy industry was in terms of gas versus renewables. It is now moving as a demand growth engine from power sector to industry sector. Fertilizers, countries like India, Indonesia, major drivers. The chemical industry, major drivers. And in general, we think about 1.6% the global gas demand will grow, which is a decent growth, slightly higher than in the past, decent growth, but 2 changes. One, Asia is the center of the growth, and second, industry sector, not the power sector, is the driver. United States, we think with the shale gas, we get the second wind as a result of the implications for the LNG. And what is happening in the United States will be a catalyst for a major transformation in the global gas markets. This is the catalyst for the transformation of the global gas markets. It is again from pricing to the definition of the contracts, from contracts to gas security, from gas security to the implications for the competing fuels such as coal and renewables. Now, it will also bring a lot of competition in the markets. For example, in Europe, where the IEA is located, we are going to see, we believe, lots of competition, especially if you remember that 70% of the gas imports to Europe comes from one destination only, which is Russia. So whether or not the 70% share will stay as it is, will grow, will be reduced, will be an important factor to look into in the next years to come. We are also seeing that many LNG importers coming to the markets, but here's I have to say a but, because many of those new LNG importers, are they going to be opportunistic buyers, or are they going to be buyers continuously? Are they going to be loyal buyers of LNG? This will depend also the conditions that the LNG exporters are going to, including the United States, is going to offer, what the market conditions are. So it is the reason, the fact that they have LNG terminals doesn't mean that they are going to get the LNG if the conditions are not right. Finally, as International Energy Agency is an organization which looks at the energy security, we cannot stop ourselves by saying that, like the oil security, gas security, we believe, an important issue. We have a lot of gas in the markets today, definitely, but some of the recent events in Qatar, Nigeria, Algeria remind us that the gas security may well be an issue, and it is the reason why IEA, in addition to oil security, now has a mandate to monitor the gas markets, the flows, cargoes, where they are on a day-to-day basis, to provide information to the governments and industry across the world. With these words, I would like to turn to Mr. McNally. Perhaps we could have a discussion. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Birol and Peter Fraser. Thank you. Again, for those of you watching online or listening by podcast, my name is Bob McNally. I'm a non-resident fellow at the Columbia Center on Global Energy Policy. I'm here with IEA Executive Director Dr. Fatih Birol and the head of IEA's Gas, Coal, and Power Markets Division, Peter Fraser, and we're talking about Gas 2017, the just released Global Gas Medium-Term Outlook. Just a few questions on my end, and then we're going to open it up to questions from all of you, and I'm sure you have them. Dr. Birol, a few years ago, when the U.S. became aware of its petroleum wealth, gas and oil, some of us talked about the United States becoming a sort of an arsenal of energy, if you will. But recently, with President Trump's speech in Poland, we hear a kind of a sharper vision, a more robust version, perhaps, of a sort of energy dominance, and a little more of an edge now to how the U.S. can leverage its energy bounty in that energy security dimension that you just mentioned. So you're based in Paris. You've just been to the World Petroleum Council in Istanbul. You're going to Washington. Everyone consults with you on these issues in the private and public sector. Your thoughts on how the energy dominance idea and theme is going down and being interpreted in Europe primarily, in Western and Eastern Europe, would be very helpful. Just your thoughts on that.
It's a very good question when you are on the table with the oil guru, like you. We get always this rather dangerous questions. So I should say the following. I mean, this is, as I said, United States is #1 oil producer today and #1 natural gas producer today. This is, and when we look at the future, we expect both in oil and gas, U.S. production will increase, continue to increase. And what to do with that? Our subject is gas today. I will tell you two examples for Europe. In my view, the natural gas revolution in the United States, shale revolution, benefits Europeans as much as it does the Americans here for the following reason. 70% of the gas to Europe comes from Gazprom, from Russia. And Russia has to choose two strategies. One, am I going to keep the market share and have the prices lower to compete with US LNG, or am I going to get more revenues but ready to have a lesser market share? Currently, just to give an example, currently 40% of the contracts in Europe with Russia in the next 4 or 5 years coming to an end. They are either going to be extended or they are going to be stopped. Now, even if Europeans don't import 1 BCM of US LNG, the very fact that they are potentially able to import LNG with huge LNG unutilized facilities makes the hands of Europeans stronger. And when you look at the last year, the negotiations, the price negotiations with Gazprom and the Europeans, there were significant reduction coming from Moscow. This is benefiting the European consumers substantially. This is number one. Number two, I will come to the geopolitics in a moment. In Asia, also there is a huge potential to reduce the emissions, diversify the Asian energy mix, and also providing support for the Asian economic growth. And here, important thing is how U.S. gas and at what cost will come to key Asian countries, and what kind of agreements will be made with this, some of the major countries in Asia in terms of trade, in terms of other issues. In my view, US LNG can, together with the Australian LNG, can play a very positive role in Asia if the conditions are there in terms of trade, in terms of prices and others. Third, finally, I can say that I see a growing role of United States in the global energy markets. This will also help to improve the global energy security, provide more flexibility in the markets, and provides diversification and options to countries in, I mentioned Europe, I mentioned Asia, but the rest of the world. And I hope the decision makers in the United States are able to make use of this growth of oil and gas production in the best way, which would help to bring more flexibility to the markets and also help to provide the impetus for the economic growth across the world, including the United States.
Right. Thank you. Peter, a question for you. And again, I want to commend you and your colleagues for a robust and thorough study and forecast. I know when we do forecasts, I'm sure there's many people in the room who do forecasts, one question I always ask myself is, what's the surprise? Where is the skew in terms of outcomes that could be different from our central sort of base case? And one way you aptly described the market is in a glut and likely to be in a glut for some time. So one dimension might be if the central case is going to be sort of wrong, is it more likely that the glut will end sooner or that the glut will be prolonged? That's one way to think about it. But really the question just is, as you look at the possible events and the risks and the uncertainties involved in a forecast. How do you see them? How would you prioritize them? Do they skew sort of one way or the other? I'd be very interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, there are a couple of dimensions in which things could turn out differently. One of them, of course, is prices could move in a different way than we've assumed. We use a very I'd say a very straightforward way of estimating the prices here rather than a sophisticated mechanism. We base it off of forwards. So obviously prices could turn out differently, and that could change a lot of things. In terms of underlying factors, we are pointing to quite a significant oversupply in the LNG markets. Based on what we're seeing, this is how quickly we think demand could grow, but obviously could grow more quickly. Another area in which demand could turn out very differently is if, as Dr. Birol pointed out in his introduction, if gas gets that additional push from policymakers. We see in a country like the UK, which put in a carbon price floor in 2015, that gas consumption increased quite markedly, quite quickly as a result of that carbon price floor. But in continental Europe, so far, we don't see the same push. And as a result, gas is actually, although it had a good year last year, is actually just steadily losing ground there. But obviously a different approach by particular national economies. The French president the other day was talking about getting out of coal in France, although it's a small portion there by 2022. Obviously, different national policies could, in the short run, could be good for gas as well.
Right. Thank you. Look, I'm just going to take the prerogative to ask one more question, so please get yours ready because I'll be calling on you shortly. We're going to ask you to come to I think there might be a microphone, and just identify yourself. Dr. Birol, there is this question of policy drivers for increased gas use. One on which there's some debate is this IMO sulfur cap in marine bunkers and so forth. In your view, this policy driver, is it likely to be give a big push to marine LNG? And just in generally, how satisfied are you with the sort of trend in terms of policy drivers that may benefit natural gas and LNG?
It can well be an additional boost for the gas demand growth, but in my view, in the shipping sector, but in my view, one aspect that we in Europe, maybe in the United States and so on, don't give enough credit as a potential driver of gas is the local pollution. So I will give you one very small story that the world, no country is a energy island in the world. I was in Brussels some 10 days ago, and my colleagues reminded that what we have said in the 2011, and at that time we said in Brussels that for European countries, what will be decided in Beijing may be as important as the decisions made in Brussels. So, and I want to give you one example. It showed that the life proved that we were not wrong. Last year, Chinese government decided to close down many inefficient and unsafe, unsafe mines, primitive mines, just to protect the lives of the workers. This was the main reason. As a result of that, Chinese coal production declined. As a result of that, Chinese coal imports increased. As a result of that, coal prices doubled. As a result of that, in Europe, many coal generating power plants switched to gas. As a result of that, there was a increase in the gas production, gas consumption in Europe. So look at the thing. A Chinese government makes a decision on their mines, coal mines. It ends up the increase of the gas consumption in Europe as a result of price trajectories. And this will happen. Not only China, but also we should keep an eye on India. India is moving to the center stage of global energy affairs in terms of oil demand, in terms of solar and the others. So therefore, in my view, as you rightly point out, we are going to see additional policy interventions which may well give an additional boost to the numbers we have shown here.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to open up to your questions. If you could, I'm not sure if there is a microphone. Yes, there is. A nice young lady in the back with a microphone. So if you would just identify yourself, raise your hand. The gentleman right here. Identify yourself, please, and your question.
Sure. Albert Golson. I'm the Executive Director of Indo-Brazilian Associates. It's a global political risk firm. The issue with LNG, because of increased LNG production, to what extent or how soon, because now gas becomes almost as fungible as oil, that the prices will be delinked as far as long-term contracts are concerned? What impact will that have on global prices as far as gas is concerned?
Should we take the questions in groups?
You want to take a couple? Okay, why don't we do that? That's a great idea. So we'll have one question on the growth of LNG and its impact on pricing. Yes, sir?
Yeah, Nazir Bore from Exxon. My question is about, if you look at greenhouse gas, societies are going down two pathways. One is coal plus renewables as one option, and the second one is gas. What types of policies and other decisions made by beyond consumers affect that choice in that pathway?
You got that? Okay. The gentleman here.
Good morning. My name is Ernesto Enriquez from Citibank at Columbia University. So my question is, within the context of North American energy markets integration, and of course the glut coming mainly from the U.S., how do you see the impact on this North American energy markets integration within the context of current administration's discourse of energy dominance? And is there any danger of coming from stopping exports towards Mexico, given the fact that Mexico imports most of its gas supply from the U.S.? Thank you.
Great. You want to take three?
Why don't you take the first one?
Okay. So the first question about LNG and how soon, as it was phrased, the de-link with oil. We certainly see already some changes going on, but we do think it will continue to be a gradual process. But keep in mind that we're already observing that a contract can still be oil-linked, but how you interpret that contract is becoming more flexible. And so as a result, I think even in an indirect way, even though a contract might be nominally oil-linked, you're seeing, because of the increased flexibility, thanks to the pressure from competition from LNG in particular, that the contracts are getting more flexible, and already being influenced by the availability of LNG based on gas-to-gas pricing.
If I may add something here, what we see, more and more contracts are becoming flexible and less indexed to oil prices, which is definitely, in my view, good news for the flexibility of the gas markets. And we also see, as was mentioned by Bob in the beginning, the prices are converging globally. This is, I think, something to pay attention to. But once again, for me, missing headlines from the gas debate is the significant reductions of prices in Europe as a result of renegotiation of the prices with the Gazprom, as a result of the potential imports of US gas. This is very important. This is not, I think it goes unnoticed, and I wanted to highlight this. Second question, coal plus renewables or gas. I think we need definitely renewables, we need gas, and we also think that clean coal technologies are important, include the CCS. And this is an area that we are, as International Energy Agency, very keen, working with our colleagues from US, Canada, China, and Norway to give a new momentum to CCS. Bob asked about our forecasts, our expectations in the past and so on. I should myself confess that I was completely wrong. I was expecting that the coal producers, coal miners or utilities would put much more efforts on CCS than they are doing now, just not for environmental issues, their hidden love for environment or something, but mainly to protect their assets as a asset protection strategy. But they have not done yet, and as a result of that, we saw 2 years in a row in many countries in the world, coal consumption is declining. But it's something that we want to revitalize. Third, the North American cooperation is extremely important for the entire world. Canada, United States, and Mexico, soon to be a member of the International Energy Agency, 3 of our member governments. I am very happy that today Mr. Secretary Perry is visiting Mexico, talk with his Mexican colleague, Mr. Joaquin Caldwell, and I hope that these 3 countries put their weight, have a good energy integration and cooperation, which will be beneficial all these 3 countries and for the entire world. When you look at both oil, gas, renewables, many aspects, there is a lot of potential to benefit from each other, and when they cooperate together. In fact, as you mentioned, I am going to DC, Bob, on Tuesday. I am going to testify on this issue in the Senate on the North American energy cooperation, how important it is as the International Energy Agency sees. Thank you.
Thank you. And to build on that positive note, my 2 cents is I'll be very surprised if the United States stops exporting gas to Mexico, if only because we need to get rid of that gas if we want to keep on producing the shale oil. So there's mutual benefit in that trade. Secretary Perry understands it. I think a lot of President Trump's industry advisors and friends understand it, so I think that's pretty much safe. But it will be helpful to have that testimony next week, though, from Dr. Birol as well. So, any other questions from the crowd? Bunched up in the back, please. Okay, the gentleman right here.
Hi, I'm Risalat. I'm a student at Columbia University. So the growth of wind and solar have been consistently underestimated over the last 15 years, and it seems like battery technologies are in a similar stage as they were kind of 15 years ago. And what kind of disruptive effects, if any, do you see in either in natural gas or like the broader energy industry overall? Thank you.
Technologies, okay. What do we have in the back there? I want to be a little share the wealth, kind of the gentleman in the back.
Hi, Jonathan Aronson, Credit Suisse. Just a quick question on the net exporters. I noticed that Canada remains, a substantial net exporter even as the U.S. grows. So, are those exports going to continue to come to the U.S., or is there any thoughts of potential LNG to China from, Western Canada? That's my question.
Okay, and one more to round us out. Yes, ma'am. The lady in front, please.
Jean Fox, I'm an adjunct of SEPA and a former chair of the New Jersey Utility Commission. On the issue of environmental issues, obviously Beijing has a pollution problem, and there's other pollutants other than the carbon emissions. But from my perspective, having also been an environmental regulator, are you taking into consideration when obviously gas production is less polluting in carbon than oil or coal production, the extraction of the gas from the Marcellus?
Okay.
Okay. So I will take the first and the last, and I will give the Canadian question to you, my Canadian colleague. So, okay, very good. So now, wind and solar are making major inroads, as my colleague said, the 100% clean energy. We are also 100% clean energy. In fact, we have energy is a very good thing, by the way. We have no problem with energy. We have problems with emissions. So these are two different stories. So we want to increase the role of energy, but decrease the contribution coming from emissions. wind and solar made major inroads because first their costs went down. The solar cost of solar went down by 80% in the last 5 years, and cost of wind went down about 1/3 in the last 5 years. Huge inroads. This is mainly as a result of the government policies that we support. What we have done is we have shown the governments, if they don't, this is important to understand, if they don't change their policies, what kind of future is waiting for them in terms of climate, environment, energy, import dependency. And in order to show them that you have to increase your support for the, if you want to see a different future for solar and wind, which in many cases they have done. And currently what we see a major change in the, for example, investments and the power generation additions. Last year, when you look at the entire power generation in the entire world, the capacity additions last year, entire world, more than 50% were solar plus wind, less than about 48% oil plus gas plus coal plus nuclear put together. Big increase, but mainly as a result of government policies. And we expect this to continue, but cheaper gas may have some impact on the continuation of strong government subsidies in many cases. Just put here as a question mark. In terms of the batteries, the costs are coming down, but we do not think that we will have the batteries ready tomorrow. I don't want to be too optimistic on that, but I will be happy to be wrong. But we don't think they will be, in terms of cost and technological challenges, they will be ready to be a part of the game tomorrow, but lots of R&D work going there. It was, if I say, I can tell Bob is an oil colleague, in WPC meeting when all the CEOs were there and the leaders, one of the major topics was, my colleague hinted here, are we going to see a peak of oil consumption and oil, do we still, the oil era is over or not for the electric cars and batteries? No question came on that respect, but I will be happy to point out that. But our view is no. We are going to see oil demand continue to increase for other reasons. Now, before going to Canada, yes, the shale gas production has one major challenge, which is the methane leakage. Methane is a very powerful gas. But what we say is that this issue can be minimized or nullified if the right measures are taken. It is not you don't need to discover a new technology to minimize it. You just need to have the right standards and regulations put in place. So we have all the reasons to believe and hope that the industry and the governments and regulators take it as a serious issue and get a license to operate from the public in order to minimize very, very important productive contribution of the methane gas to the atmosphere. As our colleagues rightly mentioned, it's a very powerful greenhouse gas. And we have all the technologies to do it, just we need to fix it. And therefore, it is for industry's reputation, for government's attention, it is very, very important. Perhaps I can turn to Peter for Canada now.
Yes, well, on the Canada question, certainly the U.S. growth in shale in Eastern Canada has been very much welcomed. And in fact, Eastern Canada, which was largely dependent on Western Canadian gas, is also turning to U.S. shale for its supplies. And so that's left Western Canadian producers in a position where they have to look for new markets. And they have been looking at developing LNG on the West Coast. And the government that was in power there until recently had a very supportive policy to encourage that. That said, with the price convergence and the price of Asian LNG in particular coming down quite significantly from its highs, and all the capacity that's already committed and being built, we don't think there'll be any additional, any Canadian West Coast LNG put into service out to the end of our forecast period for 2022.
Just going to restate the Marcellus question very quickly. Is the third question was on the Marcellus? Could you restate the question, please?
No, it was actually.
It was Canada. We're good. So we got two? We did three? Okay, good. We're good. Okay, we have a few more minutes, and so a few more questions. I'm trying to maintain geographic balance and gender balance. So I'm looking for, especially ladies who have questions, I very welcome that, but I'm also going to pick on men if there's no questions from ladies. We'll go to the back of the room. Sorry, we're going to give you a workout here. Gentleman to the left by the wall.
Hi, I'm Mark Rosenblatt from the Fuel Freedom Foundation. China right now is offsetting about 600,000 barrels a day of oil with methanol that they actually make from coal. They're also investing in, or at least Chinese companies are investing in 2 methanol plants in the US to make methanol from gas, natural gas, and take it to China. Can you talk about how, if more people like Brazil are taking ethanol or China taking methanol, take more natural gas into the transportation system, how that might change the glut?
Thank you. Gentleman in the back.
Hi, Tony Yun from Citi. Question is one, how committed is China to natural gas? Given that it's boosting renewables, wind and solar, it just backed off its coal production cut policy, and the LNG imports have to pass through, in many instances, South China Sea as well. So how committed is China to natural gas? Whether they can reach the 10% or even remotely primary energy mix by 2020. That's number one. And number two is that if you have time, the oil has spare capacity, but LNG has no spare capacity. So what to do? Given the IEA definitely, is big in spare capacity on the oil side. Thanks.
Okay, and one more. The lady, please, up here in front.
Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. My name is Marav Cohen. I'm also a recent graduate from SIPA. I have a question regarding international peace and security, and to what extent is this in discourse with relation to these vast changes that we're seeing now, as you mentioned.
Okay. I think that'll take us right to the end of the time. So.
Yes, why don't you start?
Yes, with respect to the methanol question, indeed the methanol from natural gas is a significant portion of demand growth that we have in the forecast, and so it's clearly very important. Relating to the transport sector, we have about a 20 BCM increase out to 2022. So over the forecast horizon, we don't see it as a big source of demand growth. It's coming from a relatively low base, of course, even though it grows quite well within the sector. We don't see it as having a big impact in absorbing natural gas or LNG glut over the forecast period. Now, there are, over the longer term, of course, there are more possibilities as the technology's improved and LNG and trucking improve, for example. But that's what our outlook says.
If I can add something here, which I cannot stop talking myself about oil. It is whatever the meeting is, I should say, unfortunately, but because, and also flirting with the first question. And the report we published some 2 weeks ago on trucks. I feel that we publish almost every day a report nowadays, but this is a trucks report. We made a report on trucks because of the following. The oil discussion in terms of the future of oil demand and so on is almost exclusively focused on cars. But if you look at the numbers, it doesn't look like that. Leave aside the forecast, in the last 10 years, about 40% of the growth in global oil demand came from trucks and 40% from cars. So this 40% trucks, 40% cars. And when you look at the future, trucks together with petrochemicals will be the major drivers of oil demand growth, not the passenger cars, because of efficiency improvements and electric cars and so on. So the reason I am mentioning this is that trucks and ships are important opportunities for natural gas if the prices are competitive to be another alternative. Now, coming to the Tony's question from Citi, how committed is China? Of course, this is not a commitment, this is a preference, but what I know is in that, perhaps Peter remembers the number, China is going through a major construction of new LNG terminals. There is a strong LNG terminal construction in China. Plus, domestically, we expect China to be, I think, the fourth producer of natural gas after the other key countries. And why China is doing this is mainly, once again, I want to highlight this, for air pollution reasons, to clean up the air. And therefore, we see a strong potential for China gas demand to grow. Once again, the price is an important factor here. You are completely right. There is no gas spare capacity, and this is the problem. This is the reason why we say gas security is an important issue. And how we come to this idea to look at the monitoring the gas flows is that we talked with our Japanese colleagues after the Fukushima accident. There was no Japanese government wanted to buy gas, but nobody knew where is a free cargo which is available, where does the, what is the availability of different LNG export capacity plants across the world. So what we are doing is now, of course, we will not be able to have a gas storage capacity mechanism worldwide, but we do two things. One, provide very transparent information about the gas markets, our gas security report, and second, encourage countries to have storage capacity, building storage capacity, and some of the countries are doing that in a perfect way. So if the last question, if I didn't misunderstand your question, whether of this, the penetration of gas would bring peace to the markets, I think it is better that you ask this question to your, it's not, I misunderstood your question?
Oh,
sorry.
Let me reiterate. I was actually referring to the opposite.
Yeah.
Interdependencies, international interdependencies, is something that we've been seeing throughout history, is something that promotes peace. Whereas the isolation and the, the anti-globalization kind of movement is something that is a little bit more, I think, worrisome.
Definitely, and then I completely agree with you. Plus, in my view, when we come to our subject, the US LNG providing an option, providing an opportunity for diversification of the having different sources of imports will make many countries, hence, much freer when they go to international negotiations or discussions. They have more options than it was before. When you look at the many countries in Europe, especially in the eastern part of Europe, they are more than 90% relying on one single source of gas imports, and US LNG and Australian LNG and other sources of gas will provide more options for them, and therefore their energy equation will be much more diverse, more options. They wouldn't put all the eggs in one basket, which at the end of the day will give much more freedom to them when it comes to their international policies, foreign policies. But trade is always good, we think, at the IEA. Thank you.
Terrific. Everybody, please join me in thanking Dr. Fatih Birol and Peter Fraser for this presentation today. Thank you very much.